Hey folks, it's John from A is for Alcoholic again. Today's conversation is with Janet Quinonez. I really had a good time talking with her. We discussed alcoholism, drinking in Houston. We talked about recovery, moving to Los Angeles to pursue a career in writing for television, working for NBC, and she is currently the host of the Drunkalogue, which is a comedy show that centers around sobriety, recovery, alcoholism, drinking, all of the above. So it was an awesome conversation. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Janet Quinonez.
So I got sober back in 2009. March 1st is my sobriety date. I guess I kind of, struggled with sobriety. I sort of started drinking later in life. I wasn't like a big drinker when I was younger. My big addiction or thing that I struggled with was food for a number of years. And then around the time I got divorced from my husband at the time, I guess it was like 2004, somewhere in there, is when I started drinking really heavily. And that was kind of like my new thing. It was like I was, not eating the way that I used to, but I was kind of like going to school and, we were drifting apart. We were having a number of issues and kind of knew that the divorce was coming. But and then around that time, I started just to drink really heavy. And it was pretty bad pretty quick. I didn't have like a long drinking career, but I'd say I hit all the milestones that you hear so many people talk about. Loss of, friends, near loss of job. I never got a DUI or anything like that, but I was in a lot of bad places a lot of times, and I didn't know how I got there. So, so about around 2007, I went to, a recovery meeting, heard stories that sounded like what I was going through. I definitely related, and I wanted to get sober then, but I wasn't really ready. I was still like playing with the idea. Knew I had a problem, but just wasn't ready to quit. So I went for another couple of years. Of course, things got worse, and came in 2009. I think it was around January, and like grabbed hold of recovery in a really big way. Got a sponsor, started working a program of recovery. And then I think it was around, I guess I had quit drinking, but I had broken my foot. And actually it was like it was a toe. I'd broken a toe. And stumbling around in a blackout. and was taking, I don't even remember the pain pill. It was like a Vicodin maybe, something that was not prescribed to me. It was just something somebody had given me.
Right.
And so I was doing all of the things like, but not really sober, but didn't know that I wasn't sober. I thought I was because I wasn't drinking. And so it's important, I think, to mention that part of things because, even today, like if I just had dental surgery, and if I have a call to have a pain medication, I have to be very careful. It has to be monitored. It has to be, because I know what happens when I take medications like that, narcotics.
Right.
So getting back to the story. So I think it was around, I almost had like 30 days sober from alcohol. And my sponsor was going out of town, gave me the number of a woman and said, call her every day. And I think I remember putting the number for that woman in my purse or my pocket with zero intention of calling them. And I remember kind of like premeditated planning to go to a work happy hour that weekend. And it was definitely a feeling of like my sponsor's away, like I can handle myself, that sort of thing. And I had enough of recovery in me and to know that when, I went to that happy hour and because I had sort of struggled with, I knew I had struggled with powerlessness. My life was definitely unmanageable, but I I struggled with what powerlessness meant. And she had explained to me, think of all the times you said you were going to go out and drink like a lady, and then that's not what happened. And I went, oh, I can think of lots of times that happened. So, went off to this work happy hour. And I remember telling my coworkers, it was a work thing, uh, I have somewhere to go. I have a dinner. I had all the plans of how I was going to do this like a professional. And I was like, I've got this place to go for dinner, but I really just want to hang out with you guys for a drink or two. And then two turned into, who knows, eight. I don't even remember. And I remember the friends, our coworkers, saying, "Didn't you say you had somewhere that you were going, you had to be?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." I texted them and told them we will do it another time. I'm having so much fun with you guys. And I just kept going. And then someone dropped me off at my
Mm.
car. I got more alcohol, was driving drunk, obviously. I don't really remember how I got home. I remember struggling to get out of the car.
Yeah.
And then, stumbled into the house, drank until I passed out, woke up once more with the bloodshot eyes, shaking because I always shook in the morning, like before I could get going. Uh, and bloodshot eyes are, that's just like the hallmark for me, was every single time. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, I cannot believe you're doing this again. Like, is this really what you want to do? And I remember that week before my sponsor came back from her trip, I was like, I'll just, okay, I won't go out. I'll just, just at night and just this and only one day and every other day. And I was struggling, like, just to try to see if I could moderate that week. And of course I couldn't. But I remembered her saying, powerlessness is when you think you're going to do this one thing, have one or two, for example, and then you can't. And I was like, I'm powerless. And she came back from her trip, and I was like trying every which way not to have to tell her that I had drank.
Right.
I figured she would fire me as a sponsee. I figured she would be like, you're not serious. You don't want this thing. I could be working with other women who do want it. You're not, and all of this. And all she did was say, okay, thank you for telling me, and let's start back with, the first step of this program. And that's what we did. And I think I struggled to put down a sobriety date after that because I was afraid to commit to a date. I thought it would jinx me somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, we went to the same meeting together once a week, where in this particular meeting, and this was in Texas, by the way. I got sober in Texas, Houston, outside of Houston, Texas. Um, she would watch me write my name in this book. It was a meeting where you had to write your sobriety date. They do it a lot in Texas. They don't do it so much here,
And what is it
but
now? They
it's like a sign in for the meeting. And really it's a
Okay.
way to like say, hey, here's my name, here's my sobriety date, here's my number. If anybody wants to call me, the book would get passed around, or you could go
Got it.
back to the book. It was, other than like, you still have like a phone list, but it was a way to
Mm-hmm.
you know, in actuality, it was a way to be accountable, right? So she would watch me write my name and my number in this book and no date every week for about a month, I guess. And then she goes, how come you're not writing your date down? Don't you have a date? Didn't you, you're not drinking, right? And I'm like, no. And she goes, well, what's your date? And I said, oh, I don't know. I think it was before, it was after you got back, but it was before this other thing. And she goes, you need to write a date down. And I was like, well, I don't, why? And, I'm sober. And, she's like, I forget how she put it, but she was basically like, pick a damn date. And who cares if it's not accurate? It's just pick the best to the best of your recollection, which is why my sobriety date is March 1st, because I just knew it was like after this date, but before this date. And I knew enough to know it was March 1st was a solid, truth.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was within a week. And so, then I started writing that date down, and really looking back on it, she was making me be accountable, and which I desperately needed. And yeah, so we worked through, the steps of recovery. And March 1st is still my date, March 1st, 2009. So I'm coming up on 11 years, but you know how that goes. You don't really like, I'm 10 years plus some just plus some months.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so and as far as like I kind of gave you the big overview, but the high level overview, but my drinking was definitely marked with I started out with, like I said, I started drinking pretty heavily around the time of my divorce, and I was also getting a degree, and I was finishing up that degree program, and we would go out and drink and things like that after each class was finished. And so I was sort of having like a second childhood, like teenager years, but I was in my 30s. So I was acting like, a kid, but like out partying till all hours and trying to, maintain a corporate finance job during the day. And, we traveled quite a bit in the job that I had. So it was easy to sort of disappear for a few weeks and be on the road and, you know, drink in your room or with people at night, or, you could sort of, in that way, it was almost like a perpetual vacation with the minor inconvenience of having to actually do some work, right?
There's no set office hours to keep you hindered or
Right,
hinder your
right,
drinking. As an
right.
excuse or a
Yeah.
meeting or I have to go get some work done over
Yeah, you
here
could
and
easily like, and so, and
hmm
also because you were traveling to, and I speak, I'm Mexican, but I'm not quite fluent.
hmm
But fluent enough that they felt comfortable sending me to Latin American countries, and because I could get by without, getting into too much trouble or getting
hmm
others in trouble. Meanwhile, I was a complete mess, but that would soon become evident. Believe me. I think when I started the job, I wasn't as bad off as I was towards the end,
hmm
um, and also got sober during the time I was still working there. So I kind of had the whole spectrum of, they got me at my best, my worst, and then once again at my best, like top of my game. So, I think I was close to losing that job because, every year you'd have a review and they would call me in and say, well, the perception is that you're drinking a lot on the road. And I was like, who said that about me? I was so full of, you know,
some
just as like
hmm
attitude, like only a person who is a complete alcoholic could have this bravado. And I was like, and then like, oh, well, I don't want to divulge names and all this. So it's like, I want to know who said this about me. And of course it was true, and of course I think they said I was at the airport and I smelled like alcohol or something, which I'm sure was true because I would drink so late into the night that I was still drunk in the morning, not even
hmm
sober. And I'm pretty sure I knew who it was that had said something. Doesn't even matter, right? They probably were doing me a favor by,
right.
like the jig was up. And I remember they called in like a higher level manager who was female. And I don't know if that had something to do with the fact that they were confronting me and wanted to make sure that it was documented or whatever. And I remember she said something like, it's none of our business what you do on your off hours. Because this was at the airport, would be off hours, right? We would not, that's not working hours. But technically, you're on a business trip. So you are
Right.
sort of always on the clock. But she, was trying to like make me feel okay about the fact that it was during off hours, but at the same time, validate the concern. But in any case, all I heard was, you're going to lose your job, is all I could think. And I was like, I got to find another job. I got to get out of this and get to,
Another job that you could drink at.
yeah, that I
Yeah.
could, and I didn't think that in the moment, but
Right.
that's what all the little people in my head were doing. We're saying, you got to protect yourself. You're about to lose this job. And meanwhile, I had bought a house during this time that was probably like a third of what I could afford. And only looking back on it, I thought I was being very smart because I was buying something that was so inexpensive and I didn't really need anything. I was on the road all the time. But looking back on it, I premeditated buying a house that was so cheap that I could lose my job and work at a gas station or make minimum wage and still be able to afford. That's
Wow.
so that thing of like, lowering your companions and your lifestyle to fit the drinking.
I think the best way I've heard it put was a gentleman once said, he said, regular people will change their behaviors to meet their goals, and
Yes.
alcoholics will change their goals to meet their behaviors.
Yes,
And it
that is
struck
so
me
true.
like,
Oh my
wow, how
gosh.
many times have I rearranged things? And I think that this whole subconscious or unconscious things that we as alcoholics do is we put ourselves in these situations where we're able to let this, the addiction kind of take hold, and you're like, oh well, whether it's being on a business trip, or for me it was, I got a job bartending and I thought that I had hit the jackpot, man. Like this was, late
Yeah,
nights and
free alcohol.
free alcohol, and I had access to all of it, and it was all
Yeah.
research and development. So I mean, I just
Hmm.
changing your goals to meet your behaviors. And but
Yeah.
yeah, it's something I hear quite a bit of.
That is so true, and it is, because you have to, because you don't have, and that's part of that powerlessness is that you're not in control anymore. So there's no more choice. It's like this is what you have to do to survive and continue, the path that you're on. So the drinking, I mean, I got to a point where I had blackouts so much towards the end. I was a big party girl, and I kind of went to a lot of like house music was my thing. So I would go hang out with
Hmm.
people and go to, either festivals or, Texas is particularly Houston, has a huge house music scene and quite a lot of, of professional DJs. And, I was out there as much as possible. I love that kind of music. Even now, I love that kind of music. But, with it comes a big party culture. And,
Sure.
and then drugs also come with that, and which help you go longer with drinking and extend your
Yes.
fun for the night. So I just was all in, and then I would get up in the morning and be quite still drunk and manage to like get into the office. Sometimes I wouldn't even remember how I got there. I frequently couldn't find my car at the end of the workday if I worked in our downtown building, which had like a 10-level garage or something like that. I would never know where I parked. I would honestly have to go floor to floor and just hit my the unlock button on my car until I could hear it. That happened to me so
Ugh.
many times I cannot tell you. Even now, when I can't find my car for a valid reason, like I just wasn't paying attention to the to where I parked it,
Hmm.
I will have a flashback to that and think about how I was so drunk when I got to work that I did not remember. Um, so I just kept going until I then, like, the friends started to fall away because it was like I was a big party girl and lots of fun until you're like messy and you have to be taken care of and you pass out in the corner and you lose your shoe or whatever was happening, that I was like, I was a liability. So it was like nobody wants to hang out with that person that you have to basically babysit. So I started drinking at home alone, and then it became that. And I was so this house that I bought had like window units, and didn't have good heating. We had a storm in 2008, which was towards the end of my when I was getting ready to hit rock bottom, and the I guess all of the roofs around had to be replaced, and a nail had gotten into my air conditioner and killed the heating element. And so I couldn't heat my house anymore. And this is the sort of thing that like a normal person would call a repairman or replace the damn thing. And what I did was just come home with my, at that point I was drinking like those giant bottles of like rosé or something. And that was my drink of choice at the end. It was just like cheap, not even box wine. It was just the like Gallo or some gross stuff.
Hmm.
And I would bring those bottles home and run. And the house was free. It's a 19. The house was built in 1910, so it was completely drafty, hard, not very well insulated. And I would just get in the bed under several layers of covers and drink and watch TV. I kind of had, it was like a studio apartment size house. Like it was like an old shotgun shack style
Yeah.
house. So I would
Mm-hmm.
just like jump in the bed. I could see the TV from my bed. The TV was in the living room, but I could see it from my bedroom area, and just drink until I passed out. And like I remember going to these stores and I would get my bottle or two of the Gallo stuff and like those frozen lasagnas, not even like the little mini Stouffer's ones, the like
Mm-hmm.
they're like 3 bites of food. And I would like get one of those and throw that in the microwave, and that was my dinner almost like every night. I couldn't even basically eat that. It was hardly I couldn't really stomach much food. So it was like I would just drink, maybe eat that, and then pass out. And sometimes I'd wake back up and drink more, but I tried to cover my bases. And if I did, I'd hopefully wake up with enough energy and wherewithal to drive like the quarter mile to the nearest store. And I had a rotation of those stores that I would go to so that they wouldn't know I was an alcoholic.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
So we think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I know. Until you go in at 9 a.m. on a Sunday before they actually will sell alcohol in Texas,
mm,
and you see the woman who you're so nice with in the afternoons on work days, and you say you put the bottles on the thing, and she looks at you with the most sad face because she's looking at you and she feels so sorry for you, and she says, "I'm sorry, we can't sell you that yet." And I remember I was so humiliated and embarrassed, but I was not about to leave there without it. And I looked at her in the eye and I was like, but the barely could look at her in the eye, but I did because I meant business. And I said, I remember saying something like, come on. And she just let me do it. She just let me buy it and I left. But I was completely still drunk from the night before.
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I wouldn't have just left with those bottles and ran, you know. But I was like not leaving there without that alcohol. And I think she knew that. And she just felt so sorry for me. And I was like, well, I got to cross that one off the list. I can't go back there.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that one's you got to cut that out. That makes your it kind
Gosh,
of
it was
makes your
so
world
sad.
slower. Yeah. Smaller.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
I had the same thing where I would rotate the different stores and it would be either the 7-Eleven here and then the 7-Eleven here, or if this
Hmm.
liquor store was open, and always trying to mix it up and thinking that I was being clever or smart about it, and but I was there all the time. So,
They knew. I mean, they knew with me. I mean, I
mhm.
would go in
Yeah.
there and he's like, I remember one nice man was at the store that was right by my an old apartment before I moved to that house, and he was like, he was so nice to me every time. He was so nice, and I knew he felt sorry for me. And he would say something like how come you don't get like maybe sometime get this, or he would like try to encourage me to like buy some other non-alcoholic drink as if there
Mhm.
was a chance I was doing that.
Right.
And, I just would smile and say, oh, I prefer this or something like that. And I mean, I think about all those people. I remember going back after I got sober, just by chance, we ended up by a meeting that was by that thing. And I went in there and saw him. And he was like, he'd like hardly recognize me. He was like, he goes, oh my God. Because you look so good. Just keep doing whatever you're doing. You look great.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. But I think about all those people though that they're you don't I mean I might not even remember that guy's name, but we had a very personal relationship because he saw the worst of me well, every other day or every third day.
Mhm.
And he also like cared about me and wanted better things for me before I even cared about myself enough to want better. And so you
Yeah.
think about those people, and like some of them are quite simply angels. I had so many people that were like that like tried to help or said a kind thing or whatever it was. And certainly people that they say there's that saying about God takes care of drunks and fools, and I think that's absolutely true. Even today, like I'll be out and about, like at a show or something, and I'll see some girl stumbling around drunk, and she can't find her car. She needs to but can't figure out how to put money in a meter or something like that, and I'll help. And I always think like those are the people that I had people who helped me change tires when I was in a complete blackout, or got me home safe, or for God's sake, I mean, didn't sexually assault me when they could have, or things like that. And you just think, those were the people that were like taking care of the drunks and the fools, you
There,
know?
but for the grace of God go I.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, there was this. I saw this video, and it was these two guys were out in the woods, and they came across this elk that was stuck in this mud puddle, like this huge mud puddle, and couldn't get itself out. And so they
Mm.
were trying to get this elk out of this giant mud puddle. And the entire time, this elk is fighting them and trying to jab them with its antlers because it doesn't understand and it doesn't know how, and it thinks that it's being attacked somehow. And I'm watching this thing, and they finally got it out of the mud and it ran away, and everybody was happy at the end. But that's kind of how I felt, when I was drinking. And now I look back, and there were people who were trying to help me, and I was fighting them
Yeah.
every single step of the way, like people who were just trying to say, hey. And and so I have learned that the best way that I can help people is, be available, be a good example, and be patient, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I have good friends of mine who still drink heavily, and I see them, less and less these days, but there's nothing I can do or say. They know what I do. They know what I go through. They know, what I had to do. And I don't say anything, and I try to just meet with them before, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. And
And
I'm
it's
sure, I'm sure they, whether they admit it or not, I'm sure they listen to your podcast.
right. I mean,
So,
yeah, I don't know, but
and that might be the thing. I mean, it's a service, because one of these days, and they know where to go when they're ready. If they in fact are alcoholic, and they'll
hmm
come to you and they'll know that they have a safe place to go, and a person that's going to
yeah,
understand them in a way that no one else can.
yeah. I mean,
So,
and it's a very personal thing whether you're an alcoholic or not. I mean, I have a pretty good assumption about these people I've known for,
oh
decades,
yeah,
who I've drank with, and I'm like,
we know.
but it's none of my business to tell you yours. You know what I mean? And
Right.
you wouldn't listen anyway.
Right.
So,
Until you're
um,
ready, you have
mhm,
to have that, that moment of surrender, that little window of like, I don't want to live like this anymore, and I
uh,
want to investigate if there's a different way I can live, and is it possible, you know, for
that's a
me, and
great
then.
word,
Mhm.
investigate. Because I
Yeah.
was very suspicious in the beginning about it, and I was like, "What is this? Huh? Are you sure? I mean, I guess I'll try it because I need to try something, but I
Mhm.
don't think this is for me." That was my whole thing for like months. I don't think this is for me, but sure. What do you got?
Yeah, I
Um,
think what happened for me at least was things started to get better really fast and
hmm
in a way that like I think I needed to have happen. Now, it doesn't always happen for everybody that way. I'm glad it did for me because if it hadn't and I hadn't had somebody point out like when things were happening, for the better in my life, I don't know that I would have stuck around. I mean, I don't think anybody would if you're not feeling like something's changing. And I
right.
did feel like whether it was I could go into work and hold my head up and look people in the eye for the first time in years, or if it was that I could, go someplace and that I had a reason to be, like maybe like the work holiday party or something, and be able to not feel like I was coming out of my skin, wanting to drink, like if the obsession wasn't lifted for me sooner rather than later. And that things were just getting better. I was, having more esteem, doing better at work, I was starting to develop a new friend group and kind of let go of some of and also like some of those old friends I didn't think I could let go of let me go, which was a gift that I
Yeah.
didn't quite understand at the time. I was like, we're I don't know why they don't come around anymore. Things are great. Like I would love, but maybe they were struggling with their own issues,
hmm
or knew that if they were around, it was going to be hard for me. You
Yeah.
know. So yeah, I mean, and I think, like I said, I got sober in Texas, and then kind of transitioning a little bit to how things are today, and
Yes,
how I even
please.
came to Los Angeles. I mean, when I was, many a night in a bar in Houston, like Warren's, which is like a real like a haunt of mine in the
hmm
theater district. I would write, like, scribble ideas for shows on notes, like on napkins. I would, like, write ideas for stories, or things that, I wanted to write about. And I had the urge to write for television. And I've had that since I was a kid. I just didn't know what it was. I would make up stories for shows that I would watch with my parents in my room at night, particularly The Jeffersons. That was one I remember distinctly, making up stories for. But I didn't, as a 5-year-old, like, you don't know that that's a job. You just think that's something
Right.
you're doing that you enjoy doing, and you move on with your life. And then you have a whole career in corporate finance. Um, and it wasn't all corporate finance, but it was all with one company.
Hmm.
But around the time, I guess it was 2015, been sober for some time. I actually investigated moving to Los Angeles and pursuing a career in entertainment, but earlier, as almost like the first year I got sober, because I felt like I knew more people in LA than I did in Texas, and I had more friends here. Um, and I was encouraged to stay in Texas and not make any major changes too quickly. And I'm glad, of course, that that's how it worked out. But I got laid off from that company in the fall of 2015. I was dating a guy, and we were engaged to be married. And I was already, like, taking writing classes or something, when this kind of epiphany came that, like, I want to try to go to Los Angeles and write for television. That's what I want to do. And I knew it so clearly that I knew I couldn't not try. But it was also, like, not the best timing, right? I was out of a
Hmm.
job, or going to be out of a job. I would get a severance, but that would only last for so long. And LA is very expensive, right? Um, but I'm also, like, in sobriety, you can do these things because you have the esteem and the confidence to do it. I don't know that, like, all of those, like, I still have, like, a folder of all of those, not all of them, but, like, a lot of those, like, scribbled notes on napkins. And I still keep them because they're like, I just could never do anything with that because I couldn't even get it together to pay a bill on time.
Yeah.
So, like, how could I do, doctor's appointments? I mean, I never could get that stuff. I didn't even go to the closing on that house I told you that I bought.
Hmm.
Actually, I remember I was already in the house. I had like, how you can rent a house before you can pay, like, a month of rent, but you're going to buy the house. I don't know if anyway, it's like a
Sure.
pre-buy it or pre-rent it.
Hmm.
I was in the house, and I had the closing. I couldn't, I had like 20 missed calls. And I remember being very cavalier about it. Like, oh, they can sign their side. I don't have to be there. And then I'll go and sign it the next day. The realtor was furious with me because they were waiting for me to show. Anyway, that's a side note. But
Right.
so here we are. I'm, 2015. It's like, I told my fiance at the time, like, that this is what I wanted to do. He was in a place where he works as a software developer, so he could, uh, you know, work anywhere basically. So he's like, okay, well, surprisingly, he was on board with trying it. He said, let me find a job first because we both can't go there and be unemployed.
Hmm.
And his only request was, I'd really like to work someplace where I can walk to work or I can have a very short commute, which completely laughable now to think that I agreed that that was going to happen. But it did. Like, he found a job, and I was like, all right. And I flew out by myself and looked at rentals in like 2 or 3 days. I lined up 10, which, by the way, by the time my plane landed, like, half of those were gone.
Hmm.
And I found a place, which was a disaster, but I found a place like the last day before my flight was going back, and signed a lease. And hindsight, for anyone who's listening to this that's thinking about moving to Los Angeles, you don't have to sign a lease. You can just come out here and, like, rent something for a month, do an Airbnb. I mean, like,
Right.
don't sign a lease until you, like, really know the area and the people who you're going to be renting from.
Good to know.
So yeah, so I came out here and we, did all that. We sold our house, which we loved, by the way, and was like honest to God, was like it was like a beautiful mid-century modern house, it was our dream home, and we let that go. I remember telling Ryan, was like, my husband was like, we're never going to find another place like this. This is our perfect home. And I was like, I know, but if we don't let go of it, we'll never know what other things can come. Right.
It's true.
And yeah, and honestly, like since I've been here, I have yet to be paid to write. I've been here, we've
Hmm.
now been here almost, I guess, 3.5 years. But I have loved living here, and I still do. He does. And I'm glad he loves being here as well. We're big into restaurants, and this, and of course, Los Angeles has a wonderful culinary scene of all
Sure.
ranges, and so we enjoy that. Um, most places like Houston or Chicago or anywhere like that, big cities, um, concerts and music and culture and all that, you get plenty of things that tour and come to those towns. But in LA, it's like there's some nights where it's like, oh man, that's happening and that's happening on the same night, and like you have to pick.
Hmm.
So like the choices of things to do here are limitless, and we do. I remember living in Houston. We'd come home. I'd say more like 4 nights a week, maybe one night a week. We'd go out and do something, maybe. And here we're gone all the time. We're always somewhere, either comedy shows, um, uh, music, concerts, or with the movies or dinners and with friends. And like, there's just life is so much bigger,
And
you know.
so with all, yeah, I mean, of course, in sobriety, it becomes this huge thing with, and really when you start to realize the limitless opportunities of, and you talk about things and going to comedy shows and concerts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, how do you navigate those places in sobriety? I mean, because drinking is everywhere, and
It's so
certainly,
funny. It's so funny that you asked that because I honestly no, don't think about it.
okay,
I don't sit at the bar usually. If I'm
right.
at a play, there's usually if I'm and I do a lot of open mics, and some of those are in bars and clubs and things like that. Um, I don't know. I don't. It doesn't. I think for me, like I don't have the obsession anymore.
Hmm.
So that is completely gone. And in the first like year or two of sobriety, it was tough because you'd go to dinner, you didn't know how to. I didn't know what to do, but I know what to do. I mean, it's as simple as saying no thanks if it's
Yeah.
offered. I go to concerts a lot. My husband's a big Fish fan, the band,
Hmm.
and we go to Grateful Dead shows and stuff. I'm not as big of a Fish fan, but I do like the Grateful Dead. And we go to all these shows, and there's like weed smoke everywhere. And of course, and
Yeah.
I've been offered it many times, and it's just as simple as saying no thanks. That's it. Just like no thanks. I've even been there's been I remember being at one show, and a guy was like, I don't know if he was just like didn't want to take no for an answer, or he would like was just anyway, he kept offering it, or he was maybe a little out of it and didn't realize he was not, like he had forgotten, maybe he had already asked us 3 times. And so he like offered again, and I'm like, oh, it's okay, and just that's it. And and honestly, I find that most people really aren't concerned with what you're doing, as long as you're not keeping them from having a good time. And and I know how to take care of myself, all the things you do, like I always have a way out, like if it's I'm never going to be trapped in a bad situation, like
Right.
I have my own car, or Lyft, or I mean, I don't have to ever be stuck anywhere.
Yeah.
And there's a saying about we uh, if we have a reason to be someplace, right? And in my case, it's like part of what I do now for a living. So well, yeah, I don't really ever feel too tempted. I don't have, it's not really an issue. I hope that
Okay.
continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
So,
So talk about that. Talk about the Drunkalogue
oh
show, which
yeah, thank you.
I heard from. I had Janetta on the
Yay,
show, and
Janetta.
she was great, and she was the one who suggested I talk to you.
Yeah,
Uh,
Janetta's great. I like her a lot.
so what is the Drunkalogue
So
show?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for asking me about that and reminding me to mention it. I, I'd say I was here about a year, and I started working as a producer, associate producer on a show called Uncabaret, which is Beth Lapidus does a kind of an alt comedy show. She's done it for over 25 years now in New York and LA. And I met her, and I was in a position when I first got here that I didn't have to work full time for like a hot minute. So
Mm-hmm.
I was able to offer my, to do things like intern or do things with no pay. And I was working doing the door, and then eventually she let me book some comedians and get a taste for how to run a show. And a friend of ours that we met at Hot Tub, which is a show that's on Mondays with Kurt Braunholer and Kristen Shaw. It's been going on for a long time
Mm-hmm.
also. We met a friend in line waiting for that show to start who said, hey, you should come to the clubhouse. I have a friend who runs a show there named Josh Furlinger. He does a show called The Internet Read Aloud. And we went to his show, and I'd never been to the clubhouse or had any dealings there, but I was like, oh, this place is really cool. It's like a volunteer run theater. I wonder who books the space. And in my mind I was thinking maybe I could book it for like a table read or a writers group. And Josh said, oh, if you have an idea for a show, I can give you the name of the guy. And I was like, I do have an idea for a show. So his kind of just mentioning the idea of doing a show, I hadn't even thought about it until he said something. I thought I would love to do a show that combines comedy and sobriety in some way, meaningful way. And so that was that. I booked a show, and I had a lot of good people around me, people I worked with at Uncabaret. There's a guy there named Kyle that has gone on to do Don't Tell Comedy. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Mm-mm.
I think they're celebrating their 1,000th show, like, which is unbelievable. Who like really championed me and like said, just book it, just don't think about it, just book the space and book your comedians, and it'll come together. Don't worry about it. And I was like kind of hemming and hawing a little bit about it, and but had good people around me to support me, and got the room booked. And that's 2 years ago this month, no, November, because we're celebrating our 2 year anniversary of the show next on November 13th. And we're
Awesome.
now at the clubhouse. We have a regular spot. We're there every second Wednesday at 8 o'clock in Los Feliz. And we have a good time. We always have a great lineup. I book the show I want to see, so it's always a good show.
Awesome.
And we started out just having sober comedians, but then we quickly realized that like everybody has a drunkalogue of sorts to tell. We've had people do rock bottom stuff about relationships. We've had, strictly stories, mostly stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And, people have done material about their parents who are alcoholics, or I've even had one comedian kind of say, like, they were kind of saying, I'm not an alcoholic and I'm not sober, but here's this story. And then in the midst of telling this story, say, oh, I don't know, maybe I do have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just become this like beautiful space that, where people come together. We have regulars that come every month that are, we have a really supportive audience, and we love it. It's the highlight of the month for me, and something that I really enjoy doing. My husband does the tech and lights and stuff and sound, and he actually goes to more comedy shows now than I do. And because while I'm going to open mics, he gets to go to comedy shows, but then he also will tell me about people that he's seen that he thinks would be good for the show. And then, of course, I either go see them or look them up, or, see if that's somebody that I think would be a good fit. And, that goes from there. I'm trying to get him a little bit more involved in producing actually booking people and stuff, but he's
Mm-hmm.
sort of doing it already. But yeah, and then and it kind of ties into the writing. I still write scripts. I worked at NBC for a year. I just wrapped up that assignment, but I've been blessed to be able to pitch ideas to them. I've written a couple of scripts. I've got a third in the works, and I'm writing a feature. So all of that stuff is still going on, and I'm kind of, I've finished the assignment, but I'm still trying to, to get back in at NBC, maybe in a development capacity. But I mean, I'm, loving life, and I'm so glad that I get to do something I love for a living. And all of that would never have been possible without getting sober. Never.
Right.
Because I would have just, honestly, if I were still drinking, I would have just like done the next whatever the job was. Anything that I could do that was related to something I had a skill, like, auditing, finance, compliance, something like that. I just would have taken the next job that I could kind of lay low and, keep going with
Right.
drinking. And until I
Mm.
couldn't and got a DUI, or, ended up, with something like that happening.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that, that those, they say that, like, you're a grateful alcoholic, and people always roll their eyes at that. And it's like, honestly, yes, because like I've been to hell and back, and when you have hit bottom like that and you come back from it, you live a life that is like embracing every opportunity, and you really, um, are just grateful that it's almost like you get a second chance at life,
Yeah.
so for
You hit
me,
that
it's like,
bottom.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And when you do, you're just like, that's what, I had a friend who asked me about, like, do you ever worry that like you're coming here and you're in your, 40s, and like it's tough, it's like how, coming to it later in life. And I was like, are you kidding me? I know I'm supposed to be here. Like, so
Hmm.
there's no, like, I don't have the luxury of doubt, self-doubt, and thinking that, like, I be doing something else. Well, I'm in my 20s, so maybe, in 5 or 10 years, if this doesn't work out, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And like, and when you know that that's your place and that this is it, there's no like, I don't have any of that weighing me down.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah,
That's
but
great.
anyway, so
And
the show, yeah, I love doing the show, and thank you for asking me. But that I hope that if anyone's listening, then they'll come out and check us out and see what it's all
mhm.
about.
I think it's an exciting idea, and I love that it's not obviously not exclusionary to just sober people,
Yeah.
because everybody's got an experience either, directly or indirectly or peripherally to
Hmm.
alcoholism. I found, that to be true in my life. And, my girlfriend, who's a performer, she's a singer, predominantly, but, one of her biggest complaints, and she loves what she does, but
Hmm.
one of the complaints is that you're constantly around people who are drunk, who are high, who are not there for the music, who, and so it becomes difficult to go and be a part of something bigger, and that you love so much, and not be able to be there fully with other people. And so I always love it when I hear, when she finds musicians that she can work with who are there for the music. And I've never seen anyone more overjoyed to do it. So
Yeah.
to find those pockets of sobriety and of clarity and of people doing things they love for the sake of doing them, like not because it's a place to get drunk, or
Oh
we
yeah.
because I mean, there's plenty of those places. There's no shortage. They just keep popping up all the time. So to to hear about this, it was just really exciting to me to go like, man, what a great thing, a sober comedy show, and
Yeah, and the clubhouse is a volunteer-run theater that doesn't have a bar.
mm,
So, people can bring, I guess, can bring in alcohol from outside. Like, they could
sure,
BYOB, I suppose. But like, no one's being like disruptive or crazy like at this show. And because,
mm-hmm,
I get a lot of people who are in recovery programs, and then people who just are like there because they love comedy. They
yeah,
just want to enjoy the show for 90 minutes or however long the show is that week, or that month. Something else you made me think about that maybe she might want to check out, or you might want to check out, is I've heard of this thing called Sands Bar. Have you heard of that group?
I've heard, yes, it's like a pop-up thing, and maybe you know more than
Yeah,
I
and
do.
I don't, but I mean, they're in. I've seen them mostly in Texas, with events. And I did reach out to them because I said, I wonder if you guys would ever be interested in doing something with a comedy show. And because I would love to go to Texas and put up a Drunkalogue like at one of their events. But I know they do other like singing or music stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like concerts and things. But that's really cool because the whole event is tailored around not drinking. And so they do have drinks there, but they might do like Topo Chico or specialty cocktails.
Right.
But that might be something for her to look
Huh.
into, because if she's interested in being part of something that's like where it is, a sober event, they're
Yeah.
doing those all over. So
Okay.
she might be,
I
want
might
to get
reach
involved
out.
with them. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
maybe you can have them on your show. Maybe
That
there's somebody
I
in that
it
group.
sounds it sounds cool to me. I just and I've never heard a comedian say, "Gee, I wish we could get more for these people to drink in the show." You know what I mean? I always hear this, like, it's always some drunk person who ruins the show or disrupts the show.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah. I
so.
know. I think it's just it's the culture of like, hey,
Mm,
you're going to go out and have a few drinks and see some comedy and not think about your problems for a little bit. But you can also go and not think about your problems and enjoy comedy without the alcohol.
mm-hmm.
Same thing with people who do music or comedy or performance of any kind. There's the person who feels like they have to have a couple of drinks before they get on stage. And I have the blessing, I guess, maybe, of never having. I got into all this after I got sober, so I never had it any other way to doubt that I could do it sober. There
Yeah.
was never that. But that's the same with the audience as it is with the people performing. There's the person that struggles with whether I can do it sober. So
Um, and so it's the Drunkalog. It's the second Wednesday. It's in Los Feliz
yes,
at the club. What did you say? The
the
clubhouse?
clubhouse, and
Got it.
your listeners can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Drunkalogue Show, and
Okay.
we're website drunkalogshow.com or janetquinonez.com.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you one last thing too. Now you're coming up on, it'll be 11 years and 4
Yeah,
months or
March
something
1st.
like that,
Yeah.
March 1st.
Hmm.
And is there anything that you still struggle with these days
Oh,
in
yeah.
sobriety?
I would say for me, probably the character defect of anger, which is funny because
Hmm.
I never thought I was an angry person when I was drinking, for sure. And I feel like it comes up more now that and even at 10 years, that I struggle. I think I've had some health stuff this year, and the death of some people that I love that have happened in this year, and I've noticed that anger has come up, which is angry at somebody who has left too soon, in my opinion, or angry that my health is not holding out like I'd hoped, and not even I'm still in my 40s,
Right.
so dealing with health challenges. But I will say that like finding like outside therapy that has been hugely beneficial to talk out stuff and to learn tools for dealing with anger, whether it's meditation or yoga or just getting into some fresh air and
Right.
going for a walk or something like that. But I would say anger, and also the food stuff for me still rears its ugly head from time to time. I go through spells where I just will indulge in overeating as a coping mechanism, or which is an
Hmm.
old behavior for me. But if I'm doing that nowadays, I know I'm doing it, and I can't do it long before I'm like, oh, okay, we're not doing that anymore. That's not like a
Right.
healthy behavior.
Right.
Also, staying close to the recovery program I'm in, and helping other women is huge. Just being of service kind of gets me out of that. But something that I'd say, the food stuff and anger are the two things I still kind of battle with, but
Right.
have better tools to kind of deal with it,
I was gonna say that's exactly it. You get these tools and you go, when you're able to. I know for me, I go, oh, that behavior's not good. So let's look at that. Why are we doing
Yeah.
that? And I kind of do that quick little inventory and try to figure
Yeah.
out what the source is, and then say, okay, good. So if that comes up again, we know that's not that exactly. When
Yeah.
I've had my issues with ice cream in the past. I've talked about it many times on the podcast, and
I
so,
just I just had
uh,
I just had dental surgery last
hmm
week, and I couldn't eat anything hard or chewy or anything except stuff that was soft. And for the
hmm
first 2 days, I think I ate ice cream like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you know what though? I but this is the thing where like today it's totally okay that I did
right.
that. And in the past it would have been the beginning of like a really slippery slope. But I'm
Ah,
like I was just like, you know what? F it. I'm having ice cream for dinner. Like
yes.
my mouth is like I was missing a tooth one day, and
hmm
then the next day I had like I'm getting an implant done, and it's incredibly painful. So
Yeah.
it's like, you know what? This is like it's totally okay. It actually harkens back to childhood. I know my mom was like a big like ice cream made everything better, and it
hmm
still does,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think that's great. I thank you so much for taking the time and being flexible, to
Oh,
be
it's
able
such a
to.
pleasure. Thank you for
Uh,
asking me. I really enjoyed talking with you.
you too, and yeah, good luck with the show and everything else, and scripts and writing, and I am sure that things will happen.
I'm sure it will. Just patience and, just keep putting one foot in front of
hmm
the other.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thanks again for listening. Our music, as always, is by Neglect. You can find more of his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com.
And you can find us on all social media platforms that matter: Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.